Nou ons vier disleksie-bewusmakingsweek. Het jy geweet dit is hierdie week? Disleksie-bewusmakingsweek. En ons verwelkom nou die wêreldbekende en beroemde skrywer Matt Bird. Hy gaan gesels oor sy stryd met disleksie en natuurlik die bewusmaking wat hy rondom disleksie skep. Matt, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on Die GROOT Ontbyt this morning. An honor for us to have you with us this morning. Can we please perhaps start with your personal journey with dyslexia?
Hey, it's great to be with you and all your viewers this morning. Thank you so much. Yes, I began my dyslexic journey probably in my 20s because I didn't know what dyslexia was until then, let alone know what it means. All I remember is at school really struggling. I was placed in remedial English classes because I really struggled in English. I was told I couldn't do computer studies because my English wasn't good enough, and I left school believing I was stupid because that's what most of my teachers told me. But in my 20s, I discovered this thing called dyslexia, and that helped me understand why I had struggled so much at school. Dyslexia isn't about your level of intelligence. It's simply about how you process information. And people with dyslexia like me don't process through words, we process through pictures. And that's when my dyslexia journey began.
Matt, I love how you say that you're so passionate that we change the way we think about dyslexia. You say we shouldn't call it a learning disability or even a learning disorder or learning difficulty, but rather we should call it a learning difference. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, sure. It is commonly accepted, believe it or not, to describe dyslexia as a learning disability, which personally I find insulting because actually I am very able. Neither is dyslexia a learning disorder. There's nothing wrong with me. Neither is it a learning difficulty. I do not struggle to learn. I'm one of the fastest learners. So I think we need to change the way we think and the way we speak about dyslexia and instead call it a learning difference. People with dyslexia learn very fast. They can be some of the smartest people, but we process information differently, generally through pictures rather than words.
Now, Matt, some people go through bullying on school when it comes to dyslexia, and it's sometimes a difficult thing to process. As you've said, there's not a lot of information available about it. Personally, how did you get to the point where you were able to feel like your dyslexia is a God-given superpower, you call it? How did you manage to make that shift?
Yeah, well, there was a couple of things because people with dyslexia, we often struggle with low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-belief because we're just embarrassed. We're embarrassed we can't spell or read as quickly as other people or write as quickly as other people. And so it leads to kind of very low levels of self-esteem. And so for me, one of the most significant things was in my 20s, discovering that there was a God. Not everybody's listening believes in God, but in my 20s, I began believing in God. And for me, knowing that he loved me was quite significant. It really helped me overcome some of my self-worth issues. But not only did discovering that God loved me, but he liked me. I mean, God, you have to love everybody, don't you? Even your enemies. But actually liking people, for me, that's another level of God's appreciation for who we are, who he's created us to be. So that was the first step for me in kind of facing up and holding my head high and looking people in the eyes and saying, actually, I have dyslexia. But the second thing was not just that, but it was recognizing that dyslexia wasn't a design mistake. It was a design feature, if you like. It wasn't something that's gone wrong with me. Actually, it's something that was right about me, and that actually my dyslexia was my advantage in life, not my disadvantage in life. And for many people, they view people with dyslexia as suffering with dyslexia. We do not suffer with dyslexia. Society suffers because it doesn't understand, appreciate, and include people who have dyslexia very easily.
Wow, that's quite incredible. I think we often forget that we are so wonderfully and perfectly created, and anything that we think or society portrays or tells us is wrong with us, we kind of take that in and we forget that we're so unique and perfectly created. And I love the fact that you're putting such a lovely positive spin on this, and also changing you know, what people think, changing our minds. And I think it's very important that you're using your voice, and I thank you for that. I want to ask you, how did you get to the point where you thought, okay, you know what, I'm going to write my first book?
Well, firstly, it wasn't my idea. I was sat with a friend chatting, and they simply turned to me and said, Matt, you've got a book in you. And they picked up their telephone, they dialed their publisher, and they said, I've got a young man sat in the office here, obviously it's a few years ago, a young man sat in the office here, and they've got a book in them. Will you publish it? And my friend passed me the telephone. I nearly wet myself. And that's how I came to publish my first book. It was quite a painful process the first time round, but I learnt some approaches and some techniques and some strategies that enabled me to overcome my barrier in order to write a book. In fact, I've now authored 20 books, but better than that, I now coach over 100 people a year to write, publish and launch their books worldwide. So I love God's sense of humour, to take a boy that was in remedial English classes at school to coaching over 100 people a year to write, publish and launch their books. It's funny, isn't it?
Matt, thank you once again for your time this morning. Before the break, you spoke about the fact that being diagnosed with dyslexia, you have authored 20 books and you've helped more than 100 people to publish books. You spoke about the fact that you've developed some techniques on how to actually pen down the book. Can you tell us about those techniques, please?
Yeah, sure. So I coach people live online to write their books in 100 days. And 8 out of 10 of my students finished the 100-day program with a draft manuscript for their book. But it goes right back to the beginning of the course, when I help people understand what their obstacles are, what their barriers are to writing a book. Because when you think, oh, write a book in 100 days, you immediately think, oh, I can't do that because. And my because is dyslexia. But everybody has a because. Everybody has a reason why they think they can't write a book in 100 days. So right at the beginning of my course, I help people overcome those obstacles and those barriers, whatever they might be, in order to change their mindset to then write their book. And I walk people through a step-by-step journey to completing their manuscript.
Now, this morning you've spoken a lot about mindset, whether it be your mindset with regards to yourself, with regards to what you can do. I'd like for you to please touch on the mindset that you believe parents should have when their children are diagnosed with dyslexia.
Yeah, parents, your role, of course, is the most important role in a child's life. And I really want to encourage you to see your child's dyslexia or other neurodiversity as a gift, as God's gift to them. And I know there are challenges, I know there are struggles, but always see the very, very best. So see your child's dyslexia as an advantage for them, not a disadvantage for them. There's lots of research, for example, that says that when we think in pictures, we think 60,000 times faster than when we think in words. And children with dyslexia think in pictures rather than words. So children and people with dyslexia actually are some of the fastest thinkers.
How do you get diagnosed? So you said you realized in your 20s, and that was after you had to complete your schooling process and stuff, and that would have made school harder, because if you don't know why you're thinking differently, you don't actually know how to help someone or to actually change your approach and how to do it. And so how important is it to diagnose someone with dyslexia early, and how do you do that? What are some of those symptoms or signs that they have?
Yeah, really good question. It's really important if you can diagnose early. I have 3 children, and we spotted that one of them was struggling to write, struggling to read. They really disliked school. They felt overwhelmed by the way in which they received so much information every day. And so we had a professional assessment. And this is what I would encourage any parent to do. Pay for a professional assessment of your child so that you can understand their learning difference, their learning style. And then you can provide support, additional support for your children as appropriate. And what I am disappointed by is actually the experience that I had when I was at school had not changed by the time my child went through school who had dyslexia. And I think teachers do an amazing job in our schools, especially those teachers who come alongside children that are struggling. But the leaders of our education system need to wake up and recognize that reading, memorizing and regurgitating information in an essay or an exam is only one way of proving you are clever. But by insisting that's the only way to prove you're clever, you're excluding children, you're excluding people. And so there needs to be major reform within the education system, so that actually diverse learning approaches and learning styles and learning differences are embraced, and children can be developed and can learn and assessed in ways that suit their learning approach.
Incredible.
So important, this conversation this morning, Matt. I do want to ask you that we break down some of those stereotypes and the myths about dyslexia. What are some of the key ones that you see worldwide that is critical for us to break down today?
Sure. Number one is that we think people with dyslexia aren't intelligent. Actually, people with dyslexia are equally as intelligent as people without dyslexia. There's research, for example, that's been done that says that 35% of company founders in the United States of America are dyslexic. 35% compared to only 15% in the population. And one of the professions or one of the pathways in life that people with dyslexia follow more than others is entrepreneurship. Some of the best known entrepreneurs in South Africa and in other countries around the world are actually dyslexic, because of their speed of thought, their creativity, their ideation, their ability to problem solve, and their determination and perseverance. So there are wonderful ways that people with dyslexia contribute very significantly to our society.
Matt, what would your advice be today to somebody who's watching, who's been diagnosed with dyslexia, just within a few seconds, who might be feeling a bit down, might be feeling a bit bleak about their future? What would you say within a few seconds?
In a few seconds, remember, you are loved, you are liked, and if the door of opportunity is not knocking for you, make a door.
Daar het jy dit. Thank you so much, Matt, for your time. We appreciate it. Baie dankie dat jy met ons gedeel het vandag. Dis natuurlik die wêreldbekende en beroemde skrywer Matt.